Dear professional, if you have the foundational knowledge, skill and abilities necessary for an entry or junior level cybersecurity role, then certified in cybersecurity certification is perfect for you. Today, I discuss one security policy, which is the first domain in certified in cybersecurity syllabus. This is GM Farooq Ahmed. If you want to learn more details about me, you can visit my LinkedIn profile. Today, I want to discuss on security concept of information assurance, understand risk management process, understand the security controls, ISC square code of ethics, governance process, and how to solve question in the real exam, and finally, most important areas you have to know. So, first of all, we want to discuss on understand the security concept of information assurance. So we know the basic elements of security are confidentiality, integrity, availability, authentication, non-repudiation, and privacy. First of all, we want to know about CIA triad. That's means confidentiality, integrity, and availability. We know confidentiality, integrity, and availability are referred to as the CIA triad. Sometimes we say it the cornerstones of information security. Confidentiality is the first element of security, and confidentiality seeks to prevent the unauthorized disclosure of information. The main responsibilities is to prevent unauthorized read access to data. Say I send you a letter and the letter is into the envelope. If some person which is not authorized to see this letter, and when he will see this letter, then the confidentiality will break. And when the confidentiality will be break, then we will say that the disclosure. So if the confidentiality will break, then it is called the disclosure. So the opposite part of confidentiality is disclosure. The second element is integrity. So integrity seeks to prevent unauthorized modification of information. For confidentiality, its main purpose was to prevent unauthorized read access, but in integrity, its main responsibility is to prevent unauthorized write access to the data. So if we see here two topics for confidentiality, here a read operation is performed. A read operation is performed, but in the integrity, here a write operation will perform. For confidentiality, the opposite of confidentiality, we say disclosure. Disclosure. And the opposite of integrity, we say alteration, change. And finally, the third element of CIA triad is availability. So availability ensures the information is available when needed. So systems need to be usable for normal business use. If we give an example of availability, we can say that attack on availability would be a denial of service attack. So when the DOS attack is performed, then we say that the system is unavailable. So when system is unavailable, then we say that it's the distraction. So opposite of availability is distraction. So here we see that CIA, confidentiality, integrity and availability. Just opposite is DAT. DAT, disclosure, alteration and distraction. So you will get like this questions or like this answer, which is the opposite of CIA, or when the confidentiality is a break, what can we say it? What types of operation is performed in the confidentiality? So you have to know the basic concept of CIA, right? Our next topics is authentication, non-repudiation and privacy. So these are also most important here. Here I show some example of confidentiality and some exam topics. So here confidentiality means the exam tips and some example I provided here. Actually, we have to provide the CIA, or we have to ensure the confidentiality, integrity and availability of data, because data stay in three stages. Data in rest, that's mean when data are in the server. Data in motion, that's mean when the data transmit from one place to another, say branch to head office or head office to branch, one network to another network, like this. And data in process, that's mean when data are in the memory, cache, buffering, like that. So we have to provide the security of data in these three stages. So here exam thesis, to maintain the confidentiality, you have to always encrypt the data. Data must be in encrypted form, not in the plain text. In motion, we can ensure the confidentiality by using the TLS, transport layer security. And at the rest, we use the AES-256. We have to remember these types of keyword. Here are some example of confidentiality requirements. Say PII, PHI must be protected against a disclosure using the appropriate algorithm. Password and sensitive data must be masked. So if you get these types of question, if you want to ensure the confidentiality of password, what should you do? So our answer will be data should be masked. So this types of example is very much important. So you have to read, you have to understand these types of topics. Here integrity. So Here I added some example. Code injection can modified by data. So alteration is performed in the integrity section. So if you want to maintain the integrity, or if you want to ensure the data is not tempered, or data is in the actual format, so what types of checking is performed here? Say CRC checksum, say message digest, hashes, and these types of algorithm or these types of activities performed to ensure the integrity. Availability. Data should be available all the time whenever it's required. That's mean authorized user can access their data as they are required time. So here say for the branch user of a bank, the user can access from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. He's the authorized user, so anytime he can access the data. If in the at time like at the 12 p.m., he will not able to access the data, and the server show the message server not found, page not found, contact with the administrator, like this. And this ensure that the data is not available, and the time we consider is a distraction, which is the opposite of availability. So in the SLA, actually we mark these types of activities like the MTD, maximum tolerable downtime, recovery time objective, recovery point objective. And here I also provide some example of availability requirements. Here I try to make the distinction between the confidentiality, integrity, or integrity and availability. That's mean the difference among the confidentiality, integrity, and availability is given here. At a glance, you can see it. It will be helpful for your exam. Now, another concept of security are identification, authentication, authorization, auditing, and accountability. So identification, just your ID. Say we use the Facebook or we use the Gmail. So your Gmail ID or your user ID or your Facebook ID, it's like the identification, your identity, some information about you. So it's your user ID or your identity. So if you have a user ID, if you input the user ID in a software or in a Facebook, can you log in the system? No. You have to provide the password, and this password is called the authentication. So identification and user and authentication is nothing else, just your user ID and password. So when you use the identification and authentication, that's mean user ID and password for your core banking solution or for your ERP system, are you eligible to view each and everything of the system? No. A specific role is assigned to you, and you only view, or you can read, write, or you can make the operation only those program who is assigned to you. And this is called the authorization. You write your role. What can you do in the software? This is the authorization. So you have the right to read something or to change something or to delete something. So how can we find out your activities? We can find your activities by the auditing. This is called the audit trail. So if you do anything like the identification or authentication, then your user ID and password ensure your accountability. If you delete something, how can the system find out? By viewing the audit log. So you are the accountable of these types of activities. So these are the identification, authentication, authorization, auditing, and accountability. These 5 elements also the part of security concept. Here, I try to discuss in detail. So authentication. Authentication is the process that ensure and confirm a user's identity. Here I give the example. Say, if you want to log in a system, you have to provide your password, your identity, then you can log in the system. Non-repudiation is another concept of security. Say you make a transaction. After making your transaction, say you are the sender and I am the receiver. You send me a message. So after sending the message, you will not refuse that you are not the sender. You will not send that message. So how can we understand that you send this message? Or how can you prove that this message is not sent by you? Or this message is sent by you? The only way is you have to use your private key. So here private key, public key concept is developed for non-repudiation. That's the digital signature. Because in the public infrastructure, the sender only know his private key. Any other people will not know about the sender's private key, but all the people will know the sender's public key, which is publicly disclosed. So non-repudiation refers to the service that confirm the origin and integrity of data. So these are the keyword. You have to remember that authentication ensure and confirm the user identity. Non-repudiation confirm the origin and integrity of data. Another important term is privacy. So here privacy is actually the right to be let alone or freedom from interference or intrusion. Here data privacy and data security, I show a picture here. So governing how data is collected, shared, and used. This is the data privacy. So here main keyword, how data is collected, shared, and used. It's the law, it's the policy, it's the high level statement, data privacy. And data security, protecting the data from internal and external attacker. And it's the implementation level. So privacy policy is a legal document outlining how your organization collects, uses, and discloses personal information. So these are the data privacy. Risk management process is very important for your CC exam. So risk management is a detailed process of identifying factor that could damage or disclose assets. So here the main keyword is identifying factor which could damage or disclose asset. This is the main job of risk management process. And the primary goal of risk management is to reduce risks to an acceptable level, because 100% risk may not be expected, but we can reduce the risk to an acceptable level. It depends on management. Risk related some terminology. First of all, risk valuation, that's mean value of an asset. Threat, it's mean has the potential or harm to an asset. Vulnerability is the weakness of a system. Actually, vulnerability is a flaw, loophole, oversight, error, limitation, like this. And exploit is the instance of compromises. Exposure is being susceptible to asset loss because of threat. So these terms are interrelated. So we can define the risk as a risk equal to threat into vulnerability. Or risk is the product of threat and vulnerability. Another equation is risk equal to probability of harm and severity of harm. Sometimes we can probability into impact. To mitigate these risks, we have to implement the control. So control is the proactive mechanism to secure vulnerabilities. This control may be two types. Number one, safeguard, and number two, countermeasure. So safeguard is the proactive mechanism. Preventive control is implemented here, and countermeasure is the reactive mechanism. That's when corrective mechanism is performed here. Here I show the cyclic relationship of the risk elements. So here threat, when threat is exploited, then vulnerabilities who is results in the exposure which is used for the risks or which may perform the risks, then safeguard, and finally asset. That's mean asset value. So another definition of risk is risk equal to asset value into threat into vulnerability. So in the exam you can get which of the following is the correct equation of risk. Risk equal to threat into vulnerability. Or you can see this one, risk equal to probability of harm and severity of harm. So you have to remember these types of equation. Risk management. So management, how to manage the risks. Some risks may be high, some risks may be medium, some risks may be low. So how can you manage the risks? So actually risk management or risk level identified, or how can you manage the risk, is the main job of management level activities. So before we get confirmation from management, we have to submit some reports, some documentation to management. So here, our first job is risk assessment. And in the risk assessment, there are mainly three parts. Identify the asset. That means you have to select your asset. You have to maintain the asset inventory. You have to identify the owner of the asset. You have to categorize the asset. You have to evaluate the asset. These types. After identifying the asset, we have to find out the threat or vulnerabilities of that asset. What types of vulnerabilities is available here? So when vulnerability will present, ultimately risks also is in there. We can do the risk assessment in two ways. Quantitative, that's when we work with the dollar value, with the money, and qualitative, that's judgmental or experience, like the Delphi techniques. Risk management's second step is risk analysis. First, risk assessment, then risk analysis. Value of the potential risks we have to calculate here. So what is the annual loss expectancy? What is the single loss expectancy? And we have to calculate the potential risks. So after calculating the risks, we have to take the preparation of risk mitigation. So risk mitigation is the responding to risks. And finally, risk monitoring, because a risk is forever. And the final stage is a risk response. How can you respond to your risks? You can mitigate, you can accept, you can avoid, you can transfer, reject, or ignore. So how can you read this risk management topics? So here I have some steps. You have to memorize this step. Which of the following is the first step of risk management? Which of the following is the second step of risk management? Or after performing the risk analysis, which steps we have to do in the risk management? So you have to learn, you have to know the step of risk management. Here another important part is risk response. So first response is mitigate. Mitigate means you have to implement the appropriate control. You have to find out the mitigation way. And for the mitigation purpose, we have to implement the control, appropriate control. Another response is risk accept. So when management accept the risks, if the control value is greater than the asset value, then management accept the risks, will accept the risks. Say if your asset value is 5 taka, or if your asset value is $5, and if you want to save this asset and the control value is $10, then management take decision that they will accept the risk because the asset value is $5, but the control value is $10. And this scenario says that when control value is greater than the asset value, then management accept the risk. The good way is to avoid the risks. And avoid the risks means selecting alternative option that have less associated risks than the default. We can implement the another strategy, transfer. So we have a data center. If the data center is destroyed by earthquake and we do the insurance for the, or we have the insurance for the data center, then we can recover some money, but it's limited. So this is called the risk transfer. And finally, risks reject or ignore. Actually, it's an unacceptable possible response to risks. Management observe that this is a risk, but they're not taking any types of action. They're not taking any, or they're not implementing any mitigation, accept, avoid, or transfer process. Just they neglect it, they reject it. So it's a bad practice for any organization. Understand the security control. So to mitigate the risks, we have to implement the appropriate control. So here to implement two things: countermeasure selection and implementation. What types of control we have to implement here? So here actually we implement three types of security control. First on countermeasure, then safeguard, and finally control. Countermeasure, safeguard, and control. So you should consider several factors when assessing the value or pertinence of security control. Number one, the cost of the countermeasure should be less than the value of an asset. And if the control value is greater than the asset value, ultimately management will accept the risks. When you implement the control, the second concerning point is the cost of the countermeasure should be less than the benefit of the countermeasure. Not only the asset value, but also think about the benefit of the countermeasure. Third factor we have to follow: the result of the applied countermeasure should make the cost of an attacker greater for the perpetrator than the delivered benefit from the attack. So it's also an important point. And finally, the countermeasure should provide a solution to real and identified problem. So here, the system should be real and it's the identified problem. It's not like the test systems, and you have to find out the identified problem. Root cause analysis, you have to find out the main cause. There is an important point here. Keep in mind that security should be designed to support and enable business tasks and functions. So you have to align your security, your control, your each and everything with the business case, business point. Now, security controls, countermeasure selection and implementation. It's the continuous part of the previous slide. So actually, security control, countermeasures, and safeguard can be implemented in these three major areas: administratively, logically or technically, and physically. So logical and technical are same. Here I show a pictorial diagram for you. When we implement these three types of control for an asset, sometimes we call it defense in depth implementation. So first action of control is implement a physical control, then logical or technical control, and finally administrative control. So if one can control is disabled, or if there is a flaw in a one control, another control will mitigate, or another control will protect this intruder. If we see some example of administrative control here, say a policy, procedure, policy, that's been a high level statement like the constitution, procedure, right way, after hiring, what type of action we have to take, background check or data classification, labeling. That's means the managerial level activities or administrative level activities. It's the example of administrative control. Technical or logical control is that it may be technical things like the user ID, password, identification, authentication, encryption, decryption, IDS, firewall. Technical things are the example here. And finally, physically control. Physical control, that's mean we have to implement the guard, security guard, friends, motion detector, lock door, alarm system, video cameras, sweep guard. These are the example of physical control. So applicable types of control, actually we implement three types of control: preventive, detective, and corrective. So preventive control means we implement this control. No one can easily enter into the system, or unauthorized person cannot be access the systems, is the main purpose of preventive control. So here I added some example of preventive control, like the fences, logs, authentication, and user ID and password is the first line of defense in systems. So it's the access control method, is the preventive control. For the detective control, if we see some example here, say if the preventive control will not work or not working, then intruder may enter into the systems and they may destroy the system, or they collect the data from the systems. So in this scenario, we have to find out what the intruder do, or what types of data lost from the systems. To find out these activities is called the detective control. So detective control includes the security guard, motion detector, recording, reviewing of the events captured by the system's cameras or CCTVs, job rotation. These are the example of detective control. So in your exam, they may give exam. Job rotation is what type of control? Preventive, corrective, detective, like this. Or separation of duties is the example of what type of control? Preventive, detective, corrective, like this. And another important control is corrective control. So after a detective, or after the detection of the anomalous activities in a systems by the intruder, if you want to go to the normal business stage, if you want to go to the normal business operational activities, then we have implement the corrective control. So say here some example: backup, data restore. So these are the example of corrective control. Here some another control also available, like the deterrent control, compensating control, administrative control, these types of control. So you have to learn different types of control which are applicable for the security purpose. You have to understand the IC square code of ethics. Actually, there are 4 ethics canon of ISC square. So first, protect society, the common goods, necessary public trust and confidence, and the infrastructure. Secondly, active honorably, honestly, justly, responsibly, and legally. Third number, provide diligent and competent service to principals. Advance and protect the profession is the final step. So you have to learn, you have to memorize this 4 because in the exam you can get like this question. Which of the following is not one of the canon of the ICSQ code of ethics? So you have to find out which is not true. So here, protect the society, act honorably, provide diligent and competent service to the principals. These are all the right. And if we see that, maintain competence record of all the investigator and assessment, it's not the ethics canon. So correct answer is D. And always think that to protect human is the first priority of any activities of job like the cybersecurity or data center activity. Human life is the first priority. So these are about the work. I will also share some exam questions, pattern question or sample questions or practicing questions in my next video. So thank you very much. If you have any suggestion, you can make a comment in our comments. Thank you very much.